did. I had hungers, and wow, that tasted good. And maybe you want to go a little higher than just eating one potato chip, but maybe it's a small thing first. The test for big things is the little things. The same thing is true. Think about all our Old Testament heroes. I think of Moses in particular. Before we know him because he led the people out of Egypt. God's people led this, literally huge number of people around in the desert. But for 40 years before that, God calls him away to the wilderness. What's he doing? Leading sheep around. But that was the training. That was the training. Maybe God knew, like, if you can herd a bunch of stupid sheep around, you'll have a chance with a bunch of stupid people. I've told you this before, so much that Jesus is shepherd. It's in John 10, obviously Psalm 23, and some of that language. And that when it calls us sheep, that's not a compliment. Sheep are dumb and scared, and that kind of thing. We kind of have, it conjures up images in our minds, of like kind of calendar Jesus. You know what I'm talking about, right? On the calendar, picture of Jesus all clean, holding a little lamb. It's like, no, that's why we need shepherds, because we're scared and stupid and we'll run off cliffs without his help with the rod and the staff and help, So what did Moses do? First he had to be faithful with a few things, sheep, and then he was called to bigger things. The Bible sounds contradictory at times, right? Isn't it enough to realize, no, wait a minute, Paul said this, but Jesus said this. An example of that is, it tells us in 1 Corinthians 13, it says, put away childish things. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. Okay, good, got it. Child is just bad. I need to move out of it as a Christian. That's probably what gets me in trouble. But then we flip over to a couple places. Mark chapter 10, for example, and you have Jesus teaching. Luke 18 as well. It's also recorded in Matthew 10. It says, this is Jesus speaking. Truly I say to you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it. Wait a minute. Do be like a child or don't be like a child? But when you put the two things together and you really look at them deeper, they don't contradict one another, they complement one another. And it applies to our emotions. Because the way you put this together is that whenever it says put away childish things, that's talking about actions. Being controlled by your emotions. That's what children are, right? The second is to be like a child is to trust. So one is put away childish action, but you need to hang on to childlike trust. Unless you trust like a child, you will act like a child. Unless you trust Jesus like a child, then you're going to act like a child. It all goes back to trusting him and what he says. See, you have needs. We all have needs. God, we were created with those needs. They're not even bad needs. Things for to be loved, to be accepted, to be valued. Those are God-created needs inside of us. It's what drives us to look for him. I just want to be loved. I just want to be accepted. I just want to know that I'm valuable. And I know some of you don't like when I say this, but Jesus did not die so that we could be happy. He died so that we could become holy. Now hang on with me though. At the same time, he also knew that the only true path to happiness, capital H happiness, not earthly happiness, true happiness, peace, completeness, rest, joy, could only be found in holiness. A relationship with him where you have love and meaning and security and all those hungers that we have that make us go and eat out of the garbage can of life and sin sometimes. Tell me you wouldn't be happy if you had those things. Peace, joy, completeness, value, acceptance. I know you already believe that because those are the things that you're destroying yourselves trying to get. We're just trying to get them in the wrong places, the wrong things and the wrong people instead of Jesus. It all goes back to this internal dialogue, our thinking. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. I'm going to paraphrase it. You're seeing it there. But basically it's what it's saying. Look, tear down every argument and every opinion of the world that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. Tear it down. Don't let it stick around. It's a cancer. If you leave it there, it'll just grow. And we're too susceptible to worldly advice, to worldly opinion about how to achieve love and peace and joy and acceptance. how to be happy, how to be holy. Tear it down and do what? Take every thought captive to make it obedient to Christ. The image there for me is it's kind of showing you that there's this wild animal idea, right? That your thoughts are wild animals. They run wild. When they run wild, it causes emotions that are wild. Then you do actions that are wild. And what he says here, what? First, corral it, capture it. Put boundaries around those thinking. Be realize whatever the thinking. Wait, that's not true. No one loves me and I'll never be. That's a lie. Those are wild thoughts. That's going to lead to wild emotion and therefore wild action. Take those thoughts captive. But then we're not done. Otherwise, all you have is just a caged wild animal. But first, you tame it. You capture it and tame those thoughts. Don't let them run wild. Take them captive. The second part, to make them obedient to Christ. First, you tame it. Second, you have to train it. You can train your thinking. Otherwise, you just have a wild animal. You just have to have it. You happen to have it in a cage or a corral. How do you train it? Instead of just saying, don't go out here into the lies that I'm not loved, that I'm not accepted, that God's not going to take care of me. You tame it, you capture it, but then you start speaking truth. We've read it already. Write it on your doorpost. Write it all around when you wake up, when you lay down. Put truth into your life. You got a whole library of truth. Are you spending time in there? The world preaches at you 24/7. God's only preaching to you when you invite it. I think that's part of the reason why it's so important to discipline and commit yourself to being here. That's one of those small things. I know sometimes it seems hard, but I'm telling you, showing up to church, if you're struggling with that, then you're struggling with small things. That's not going to be the biggest thing God asks you to do, I promise. Start with those small things. Prove faithfulness in those small things. Discipline in those small things. Then when the big things come, you've worked that muscle a little bit. I point to baptism and the same kind of thing, because it's sort of like if someone's really struggling with, once we show Jesus did it, Jesus taught it, Jesus instructed it, He invites us to it. Well, I don't know if I want to do that. I can do that or not. Oh, but you're not ready to be a follower then, because I promise you, getting in the water is not going to be the hardest thing He asks you to do. After that, He's going to ask you to forgive that person you hate, to love that person who's mean to you, to be selfless in your marriage, to not chase the carrot, the money that's always dangling out there for you. Those are the easy things. Start with those easy things. Tear down anything that goes against God's knowledge. Tame those wild thoughts, and then train those wild thoughts by speaking truth. One of the things that Amy does for us is she's memorizing scripture with some of our other ladies. And so what she does is she writes in whiteboard marker on our mirror in our main bathroom. And she has a verse up there. Now, granted, I think it was last week, I think it was a whole chapter or something, because it was like the entire mirror. I couldn't even see myself to shave and through there. But I know Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Now it's a shorter one. Post-it notes, train those thoughts so that when the lies show up, you've reflected on it enough and wait, that's a lie. And I know the truth that combats that lie. For God so loved me that He gave His Son for me. Talk about love. We're battling those lies, those wild animals that lead us astray and seek to hurt us. 5 practical things. I hope you're already writing some things down, but 5 practical things. First, take every thought captive. Take every thought captive. Tame those wild thoughts. That's what keeps us then from following our negative emotions. Whatever is true and good and pure and noble, think about those kinds of things. That's Philippians 4:8. Take every thought captive. Number 2, read scriptures that pertain to the emotions with which you're struggling. Okay, this is where we get real specific. We don't have time to go down every one of those. That's why I'm pointing you to that Bible Gateway. Go in there and type out anxious. Is that your struggle? Is it stress and anxiety? Type out anxiety. See what verses come up. Pull off half a dozen of those. Write those things down. Spend some time there in that place. I know, especially if you're new to this thing, it's kind of overwhelming. And you know what? So go to BibleGateway.com. Put something that you need to learn about. Pull out 6, 12 verses, and just study those things every day. Read scriptures that pertain to the emotions with which you struggle. Is it on love? Do you really struggle with that because of where you came from, because of experiences in your life, wherever it comes from? Then type in love and see what is it that God says is true about love for you. Is it anger? Is it about your value? Is it, what is it you struggle with? Tame those thoughts, but then train those thoughts. Number 3, pray for God's help in overcoming those destructive emotions. In doing that, let me define that a little differently, okay? Because sometimes I think we say, God, please help me, please speak truth in my life. But our Bible's sitting over on the couch, and I think sometimes, we're saying, God, why won't you speak to me? Just anything, Lord, would you just speak to me at all and help me? And so that's why I didn't start with prayer, because to be real honest with you, I think that's the most important thing. But we don't define prayer correctly. We think we're asking for the help. But I want to say 2 things. Pray and ask God's help for that, but include 2 things. Confess your weakness about that. Name it. Confess your weakness about it, and then thank Him for giving you all that you need to combat it. Because then it's going to help you do more. Number 2. Put those scriptures that's going to feed you and help you combat, tear down whatever the world has taught you, through your experiences, through your struggles. Train that. Number 4. Interrupt the automatic reaction. Truck comes on, automatic thoughts, emotions on the freeway, actions follow, right? The same thing happens in our marriages, with our children, and our finances, with our workmates. Interrupt the automatic reaction. One of the tricks, this is kind of a psychology trick, because what happens is no matter what thought process you're in, you have to do something that jars you out of that. One of the tricks is some people, they'll put a rubber band, they'll carry a rubber band, just wear it on their wrist. And this is sometimes true when people are trying to stop some bad habit. Oh, they see the triggers, and the mouth waters, and I want to eat that, I want to smoke that, I want to do that, I want, whatever it might be. You just pop that rubber band. Because the brain, if you understand, again, knowledge, when you understand that nerves can only transmit so much information to the brain that registers pain at a time, that all you have to do is have something, sort of like if you smash your toe, how do you make it feel better? Well, you smash a finger. But you can do things like that, things that interrupt that automatic process of context. Something happens, emotion, action. So you interrupt that. Now I know some of you, next week you're going to come and your wrist is just going to be all like bloodied and red. But it's going to be a start. Interrupt that automatic thought so then you can then reflect on it. Okay? You can only feel pain in one place at a time, so try to feel it somewhere else. Will help distract you from that. When I was a kid, I remember how old I was. I think maybe 8 or 9. My dad, this is part of my own trauma, okay? My dad ran over me in a pickup. Not just ran over me, actually parked on me. It was really windy, and I always thought it was really cool because the adult guys, they would open the door before the truck actually stopped. They'd start getting out before. It was real windy that day. We were doing that, so it wasn't quite to a stop. I started opening the door, and he just pulls me right out. And so he of course, I falls out, so he puts the truck in park, he runs around, and he's parked on my leg. So he has to run back around, and drive off my leg, and bruised and battered, not too bad. A couple more sessions of therapy, I should be over it. But something my dad always done, I find myself doing it with my children, is whenever you get hurt, rub it. It's that same idea that only certain information can travel up those nerve endings to your brain. If you rub something, okay, you smash your leg, rub it, and the rubbing actually confuses some of the brain neurology. And what I was hoping, I was just going to be really mad if my dad would come around like, rub it. I thought it was a little bigger than that. But interrupt that automatic reaction. Interrupt that with those messages that are being sent that cause you then to have certain emotions and certain behaviors. Clapping your hands, a rubber band. 5th one, final one. Practice overriding your emotions. Small things. Small things. You know what? I want to eat that, but I'm just not going to have that. Instead, I'm going to have this. And that's a lot of what fasting is about. That's something we just so don't understand and practice. That's so much of what that's about is body, you are not in control. Spirit is in control. And it helps you focus on certain things and prayer and those types of things. But it's very much saying that no. Those desires, you're not in control. You're not running the show. I've tamed you. I've trained you. You are now under the Spirit's control. You're under my control. Practice overriding those emotions. The world says, if it feels good, do it. God in His wisdom, truth, says, if it is good, do it. But you have to be able to make that decision from your mind. We're out of time. Flying along in life. I know you're flying along in life and it's crashed, right? Is that kind of where you're at? It's kind of taken an unexpected turn. Those dreams you had when you were 12 about how life would unfold perfectly hasn't happened. And you find yourself floating in the water and you grab hold of whatever is floating. And I get that. When you're desperate, grab whatever's close. Christian comedian I was telling you about told a story about, he thinks it's funny. We appreciate this, especially living on the island. Anytime you fly, you're going to be over water. So the flight attendants, give you the speech. In case of a water landing, that's funny language to me. You mean a crash? In case of water landing, the seat cushion you're sitting on will serve as a flotation device. And the comedian was saying, hey, I don't know about you, but if things get really hairy in a really scary situation, something I've been sitting on, you won't be hanging on to it. But so many of us grab onto lesser things. There's a barrel floating by, a 50-gallon drum, and we're trying to hang on to it to stay afloat. But what happens? There's no handle, right? So we just keep slipping off of it, and then there's a hole in the barrel. What's happening? It's going to start sinking. And if you hang on to that thing, it's going to take you to the bottom. What I'm telling you this morning is that Jesus is flying over in an orange helicopter and He's dropping a rope down. He's saying, let go of that and grab this. And I want to acknowledge this morning, just like floating in that water, that's scary to let go of that thing that's helped you stay afloat at some level. Regardless of what evil and consequences brought into your life, it has helped you float a little bit. Jesus is looking you straight in the eye this morning. He's saying, trust me. Trust me. Let go and grab my hand. Put your emotions aside, the doubt, the fear, the lies. Put those aside and put your trust in Jesus. Determine this morning. We won't even talk about how to get there, all that it means. All I'm asking this morning is determine this morning. Make a decision to say, I am going to trust whatever Jesus tells me to do. Then we'll start learning and seeing what He said. Will you trust whatever Jesus tells you to do? It's another reason why you have to be in a group of people like a church, because you got to find other crazy people who are trying to do that as well. People who know and it's worked for them, so you see that, all right, this is nuts, but I'm going to do it because it's what Jesus says. It's so different from what the world says. But this morning, that's what I'm inviting you to do. You know what? I'm going to let go of the sinking barrel that's helped keep me afloat. And I'm going to grab onto this rope. Because Jesus has life planned for you. Not just survival. Life to the full. And when you give this up, He's not just giving you something better to float. He's wanting to help you fly. Those are the plans that God has for you. Can't be controlled by your fear and your emotions, because then you're just going to cling to that thing that's going to drag you to the bottom. Make that decision. Even as we sing this song, if you're still wrestling, I want God to convict you. As we sing this song, will you make that decision? I'm going to trust Jesus. Let's stand and sing.